Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Backstory Podcast. This is actually a special edition of the Backstory Podcast. The Backstory Podcast is starting to gain some speed. We appreciate your viewing. We appreciate your ability to be in your home and be on your private devices so that we can bring you some information. We're working in two basic areas for the podcast. One is to have some interviews from people I think you'll really like. Many of these are people that got their start recently and have really taken off in different ways and been able to do that. And we do this a lot of times because many of you are teachers and healers in your own right. And you want to find out how other people did it and where they're at and what took place. So we're doing several of the interviews to be able to do that, at least for the time being. And that'll go on for a little while. We've got quite a stack of people to talk to. The other part, of course, which is a more important aspect, is to fill you in on what the group has been saying in many of the classes that are coming out, particularly in the LightMaster class. LightMaster is our, every week we have a LightMaster class. For the most part, we have 4 times a month that we meet on Fridays. And sometimes it's a focus event where it has a specific topic, like the new one coming up is the pineal gland. The 5D pineal gland activation, which was actually going to go for 2 months. So it's actually going to be 4 different events. And people can come from the outside. So you can actually come to the 5D pineal gland activation just for that. But LightMasters get it free. And they also get 2 other days a month that is just LightMaster, where we just focus on the higher aspects of LightMaster. I want to tell you about what we're going to be talking about today. I want to tell you specifically about things that are going on planet Earth that I have been very hesitant to talk about. You may have felt my reservation, and for those of you who know me from years past, you know perfectly well I have a hard time talking about ETs. I have a very difficult time talking about these other beings there, even though the group has talked about them since we first began. In fact, there's a lot of information about this in the first book that we wrote in 2000, 24 years ago, which was all about Remember. That book was a groundbreaking book for me as well, set down a whole bunch of very interesting ideas, but they actually talked about them. I don't think I called them ETs, although we called them parental races. I'll tell you more about that today because that's the focus. We want to tell you what's going on planet Earth right now, what happened during the election, what happened during the elections of 2020 and 20. Anyway, we've got some interesting things going on. The reason I'm also bringing up the LightMasters, and welcome to you LightMasters, we're starting a whole new series of LightMaster. It's called the 2500 series because it's 2025. And we'll be beginning that on December 1st. So I'm not sure exactly when this is going out, but we're going to try and get this particular podcast out as quickly as possible because it's a special podcast. But the group has really been pushing me to talk about much more of the things that are going on. They show me some of these things behind the scene, and sometimes I bring them out and sometimes I don't. And that is Steve's hesitation. Well, folks, I'm past it. I'm absolutely past it. With what's going on the planet right now, the group is showing me more and more and more, and I just cannot hold back anymore. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about where we are on the planet, what is taking place, where it's coming from, some other aspects of that. Now, the group focuses on empowerment. Please understand that. And that's the whole idea. If we can share with you exactly what the group is saying is taking place, at least you can be forewarned. You can be aware. Now, we also don't want to get overly attached to the 3rd dimensional reality, which a lot of this is happening in. We want to be able to step up into a higher vibration of the 5th dimension and actually live there all the time. And that's really how the group has been talking about all of this stuff, and especially in the first 2 to 3 sessions of LightMaster that are coming up. LightMaster, for the first 2 or 3 sessions, we're going to be covering the history of humanity and the history of Earth, and how basically we've had many civilizations before what we think is recorded history. We think we go back a few thousand years and be able to do that, but the group says we actually have gone back 9 million years. And this is our 4th attempt at a planet. So there's a lot to this we can talk about, and that is what we're covering in LightMaster right now, is we're going to be talking about all these aspects, things that have taken place. We'll be covering more and more of this, at least during the first 3 or 4 sessions of LightMaster 2500. It'll all be about the history of Earth, the history of mankind, us, our parental races, things of that nature. So I'll try to get into as much of the prevalent stuff that we've been talking about, but it's all just completely flooding out at this time. And the group wanted me to stop everything. We had an event scheduled to go out in place of this, and the group basically is pushing me to turn on the cameras and record for you. So here I am. I do pay attention when they say that. So anyway, let me explain a little bit about that. And for those of you who don't know me, if you're new to this, I'm Steve Rother. I'm the channel for the group. I channel entities from the other side of the veil. I'm very proud to do it. I've been doing it for some 27 years now, and 8 books, 5 times at the United Nations. You know, we've done a lot of work. So anyway, I'm very honored to be there. The group, the whole group's idea is to offer you a different perspective. We don't expect anyone to believe everything that they say. Real simple. What we try to do is plant seeds with you, so you can make your own choices accordingly and at least have different visions and different views. But that's what the whole process is about. Please use your discernment, your individual discernment. If you're not ready for what I'm about to say today, please leave it, because it was meant for somebody else. And furthermore, the other aspect that they talk about with discernment is that if it's not in resonance with you, leave it behind, but don't judge it. Don't call it good or bad. Just say, that's not for me at this moment. Okay, that's all the caveats I'm going to do today, because I have been the one who's been really resistant to talking. I have really good friends that channel the Palladians and the Assyrians and all kinds of stuff and they brought some beautiful messages through. But Steve has simply the group. They're from the angelic realm. They're not from another planet. So it's a bit different situation, I think. But they're starting to unfold so much of this information. Let me kind of bring you up to date. Number 1, Donald Trump was just elected president. But was he really? And I will tell you, the group has very clearly told me this was not what was supposed to happen, although they told me it was heading in this direction almost 6 months ago. I've been talking about this with our staff. We have a staff meeting every Thursday, and we thought it would be very disempowering to tell people that they thought Donald Trump was going to win, and let you make your own decisions, because it's truly a third dimensional aspect we're talking about. Several aspects of this that we talk about, and we don't want to get overly involved with trying to influence anybody one way or the other. Now, what happened here? Well, there's some interesting things that took place. He became president in 2016. What happened there? Well, some fascinating things took place. And I will tell you, it wasn't all planned the way that everybody thought it was going to come out. Obviously, it was a shock to everybody when he became president, because all the polls were very heavily favoring his opponent. And on top of that, she actually won the popular vote by over 3 million votes. So it was a positioning thing. And of course, all the finagling that he did to try and force the issue, including hanging his own vice president. Literally, there was just craziness going on this planet. And I'm asking the group, what's this about? What's taking place? And they said, a lot of this is technology. And we've been talking about some of the technology that's changed. We've seen this before with a lot of things. We saw it with Brexit. We're seeing it all over the world, usually having to do with democracies. We saw it recently in the UK. When the UK had all these eruptions and it took to the street, it turned out to be a false Facebook post. We saw it before that with the Rohingya from Myanmar being cast out of the country, basically, by the Muslims on a false Facebook post. There are ways of controlling people and getting things moving. We know that fake information and lies travel 7 times further and faster on the internet than the truth does. And that we can tell you, plain and simple. That's measured fact. So with that, this is what was happening. People were being controlled in different ways. And we'll tell you, Brexit was certainly one, and President Trump being elected in 2016 was another. Now, with that, what happened? Well, it wasn't set up that way originally. There was no real energy or the high technology behind him, I will say that. Now, when I talk about technology, I'm also going to be talking about our parental races. ETs, if you will. I don't like to call them that because there's many beings out there throughout the universe. The group said we had 6 parental races. Only 4 of those parental races are left. The others we're in the finite side of things. Things have a beginning and an end, including entire races of beings. We're trying to save humanity right now. But the reality is we run this again. Now, with this, 4 of those races are here working with us. Some of them are actually trying to help us. Most of them are trying to actually save the earth and change things. We saw this happen quite some years ago. I don't know if you heard the stories or not, but in Russia, and we all had major nuclear weapons, but in Russia, the ETs were flying over their bases where their rockets were hidden, where the missiles were hidden underground, and arming them and setting them to go off automatically. And then at the last minute, they canceled them out. I think they were trying to show basically that they had control over things. Now, those are some of the good guys. We've also got beings that are our parental races that are trying to influence us in different ways. And they make deals. The group has been talking a lot about deals they made with the President Truman, with President Eisenhower after him, and several people from that point. President Eisenhower actually was the one who made trade for technology to be able to allow them to abduct a certain amount of people with the condition that they would erase their memories and they wouldn't remember it. Well, of course, under hypnosis, they're remembering everything, so you don't change the Akashic records. You just simply remove the first surface of their memory. Now, with that, some of these are even what we would call the good guys. They don't really mean a lot of harm to us, although they scare the bejesus out of us when some of this stuff happens. If you've ever seen any of the many documentaries that are surfacing, and a lot more are coming. There's going to be much more about ETs coming in the near future. They are not going to land and say, here, take us to your leader. That happened years and years ago. Now, if people want to have influence on us, they basically make themselves known, which they've been doing a lot of lately in the last few years. So much so that the United States government is having a really hard time covering it up. We've always known about Area 51. We've known about Broom Lake. We've known about Groom Lake. We've known about all these hidden places where we have these covert operations. Recently, one of the admirals in the Navy who was in charge of these operations went to inspect the place and found that they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't. So the reality is we're not quite sure who it is. We're not going to get involved with all the conspiracy theories or the Illuminati on Mars or anything else. That's not important stuff. What we want to see is how we're being affected right now and what we can do about it. We have a massive explosion of technology, and so much more is coming. If you haven't been following along, there's several things that are taking place. Number one, war has moved online. People are being hacked right and left. Used to be a really big deal. If your name was stolen from a company, they had to notify you that. That's not happening the same way anymore. And it's going to stop because of the simple reason that it's becoming commonplace. So with all this taking place, we're having an explosion of technology. Everybody knows about AI and how it's going to absolutely change our world very quickly. We talk about the invention of the cell phone. We talk about the invention of the computer, which all happened in my lifetime. The reality is everything took a massive turns when those things took place. The other reality of it, as smart as we think we are, as arrogant as humans are many times, the reality of it is that some of these things were technologies that were planted. Does it mean that IBM did not come up with the first computer, the first integrated chip, the combination of all the transistors and the semiconductors that were able to be programmed? No, they did. But the idea was planted. Ideas were planted with Steve Jobs. Ideas were planted with Microsoft, with all these other companies that were influential in changing our lives. So with that understanding, and again, this is another view from the group, with that understanding, we have a massive explosion right now. AI is changing our world, and it's just getting started. On top of that, we have computers that are going to completely explode. We have quantum computing. Now, quantum computing's been the talk of everything for a long time. The group has said for years, many years, over 20 years, they've talked about living in a time of no more secrets. When quantum computing is finally in place and actually being used on a regular basis, and right now you can actually use IBM's quantum computer, it's called Watson. You can go online and use it for something. The reality is this is going to be much more prevalent. Things that took ages, sometimes 10,000 years for a normal computer to do can be done in 15 or 20 minutes on a quantum computer. Much faster. Now, you have passwords. You have probably had a password to get into wherever you're watching this right now. The reality is those passwords can be hacked just by trying all the numbers and all the combinations, but it takes forever to do, especially with a normal computer. Quantum computer can do it like that. So you can see where the group's been talking about no more secrets. We need to brace ourselves. We know this is happening. Our financial institutions know it's going to happen. They're trying to prepare themselves. It's already happened with a lot of things. You can hack into people's credit cards so incredibly easy. Well, of course, you're paying for it too. Isn't the average rate of a credit card now about 25 or 30%? It's changing very quickly. Our world is changing very fast. And with that, we have beings, we have some of our parental races that are looking, one of our parental, a faction of it. I hate to call it a whole planet because it's not. And that would be like saying Earthlings. Well, are you talking about Ukrainians? You're talking about Americans? You're talking about South Americans? What are we talking about? Because we're literally in all these different factions. So a specific faction of one of our parental races is trying to actually make deals and making these deals with our leaders and trying to control us in different ways. What is their total outcome? We're not going to get into all that right now. It's not needed right at this moment, but they're definitely giving us technology to control things. We saw what happened in a lot of ways. Some of this is the technology that has exploded having to do with social media. With social media, people are incredibly influenced. More people right now are getting their news and their ideas from the YouTube page than they are from actual credentialed news reporting. And news reporting is now all over the place. Even news stations that have won Pulitzer Prize for their news reporting are now obviously getting into conspiracy theories and other things because there's money in it. Very simple. So with that, a lot of this stuff is changing very quickly. So what took place? Let's go back there for just a minute now that I've kind of explained the base of what's going on. And this is just the base. And please don't think that all the aliens that are here, and I'm sorry, they tap me on the shoulder every time I use that word, Because they're not aliens. They were here first. Anyway, one thing we know about every alien that has been actually recorded, captured, diagnosed, or taken apart in some way, we know several things. We know that all of them seem to have the 5 stars, the 2 hands, 2 legs, and a head. They all have human DNA, which completely validates what the group has been saying since the year 2000, that these are our parental races. It's part of the reason they're here. Some of them are here just to check up on us. Like I said, many of these beings are here and have been for some time, long before our recorded histories, but have been here a very long time, working with different levels. Most of our archaeologists believe that humanity started some 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. I'm not sure what the number is, but in a certain range. The group says, no. This is the 4th time. We actually started on Mars. They've got all these stories that they want to tell people about how human race has been started and stopped. We all know about the last one. It's in every religion on planet Earth. It's all about the flood, the Great Flood. Well, this was actually the end of an ice age. It happened very quickly. The group actually said there was a comet that broke apart, landed in the ice itself, which is why we don't have the evidence or the craters of those now, but basically melted that ice very quickly. It's called the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas is actually the end of the ice age, which caused all the floodings. It happened very quickly. We know Lemuria sank. We know Atlantis sank. We hear all these stories that have survived and been channeled by many different people. Well, this was part of it, but it wasn't the first time. This happened 4 different times. We're in our 4th world. And that's some of the things the group will talk about. And we're covering in LightMaster in much more detail. With all that, what took place? Well, the reality is nobody was using this information to influence elections. And then 2016 came along. And an interesting thing took place. John Podesta's email was hacked by Russia. Those emails, some 60,000 emails, were given to WikiLeaks, who published them. An interesting thing took place. Yes, it embarrassed some of the things, because, you know, in emails you get personal, you say things. Ask Peter Strzok. Anyway, different things that take place. Another story, sorry. But basically, a lot of things took place because of that. One of the things that was uncovered was that he was working with the lead singer of Blink-182, and they were trying to uncover a lot of information about aliens. Well, that wasn't going to be in harmony with this one faction that was trying to control things. They do not want this out. They want to be dealing with influential people only. They want to be dealing with presidents. They want to be dealing with world leaders. They want to be dealing with wealthy people. They don't want to be dealing with everybody. That would be a takeover, and they're not interested in that. They want to harmonize us. They want to train us. They want to make us a spot where we can live, which is exactly what they did in what is called the Garden of Eden. Thank God the feminine energy rose. Eve bit the apple, and they were cast out. Again, the group has a whole different story about the Garden of Eden, about the beginnings of many religions were this way. So anyway, we'll get back to some of these things. Again, we're covering them in LightMaster in the 2500 series, going to be very quickly. So with this, what took place? John Podesta's emails were hacked. It was told that when Hillary Clinton became president, he was going to start unveiling all this information that was hidden by the United States government. Well, not only do a lot of corporations and money behind this, like covert operations that are well hidden, they didn't want that out. On top of that, this faction of our parental racists did not want it out either. And they jumped in. They jumped in and basically threw technology on the planet very quickly, aimed it in a certain direction, and Donald Trump won the election. So they didn't have to do that. But it was partly not because of John Podesta's emails being hacked and released to embarrass Hillary Clinton. It was much more about letting the world know what John Podesta was going to do when he became chief of staff or whatever he was going to be appointed in Hillary Clinton's detail. That was the first one. Of course, at the same time, that same information was used for Brexit. It was used for a lot of things to influence people very quickly. It works. It doesn't mean that one side's good or one side's bad. Please understand that. It doesn't mean that one side's smarter than the other side or anything else. Many of you know people that voted one way or the other. Some of you may have voted one way or the other. It just simply means that this technology is powerful and it works. Real simple. And it happened very quickly. It's not the first time technology was dumped on our planet. Again, we're telling some stories about some of that in LightMaster. But the idea is this was what took place and why everything is changing, why democracies all over the world are ending, are coming to challenge, or being taken over, like the one in the United States. Now, were they doing it alone? No. They're making deals with presidents. They're making deals with people that are very influential, particularly people with a lot of money, which is where the Heritage Foundation comes in, which is where the religious right comes in. A lot of this was also worked with them, in harmony with them. Now, the religious right has been planning a takeover for some, 50 years. We've seen that coming in a long way. Now it's working. It's real simple. It's happened. You're going to see the Constitution dissolve. You're going to see him go after many of the people that have not been his friends. You're going to see a lot of dictatorship basically taking over the United States. It'll happen slowly at first, we hope. But even the most recent things have taken place. We've seen MSNBC, a very left-wing cable broadcast system, wonderful, award-winning system. Actually, probably, I know that Rachel Maddow was actually the #1 newscaster in the United States for many years. Well, NBC has just distanced themselves, just let them go on their own. So we're starting to see some breakups of some of these things already. His enemies will be attacked, including news stations, including news people. So that's exactly what happens in Russia. That's exactly what takes place and why many of the Russian people don't really know much about what's going on in some ways. In other ways, they absolutely do. And please don't think they're not smart or anything else. But when you're not exposed to things or don't have access to these things, you can't get the information. That's going to happen in the United States. So with this, we also have the advent of social media. Social media has caused a lot of things. Social media probably delivers more news to people, even though much of it is fake news, which used to be a term that the news stations used to describe the propaganda that Russia was sending in through our news channels all the time. Turned around and used on them now. Fascinating ways of doing business. But that took place on a big scale. This time, what took place is President Trump was elected, ran the course. They tried to do it again, but people blocked it. A lot of people blocked it. Number one, they saw what he was doing. They stopped it, even though he was convicted. He's a felon in the United States and just about to be sworn in as our president. What do you think that's going to happen to crime in the United States? The rule of law is gone. Well, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you we're also heading for a lot of economic challenges coming up in the near future, some of which was building anyway, but it's liable to explode. Right off the bat, you're liable to see things go through the roof as possibilities, and after that, we're liable to discover some weaknesses that are coming with that. What took place then? Well, an interesting thing happened. After the 2020 election, the group showed me something that sometimes they just say, pay attention. And I paid attention to this. And I didn't get the answer right away until recently. Now I have it all. So here's what happened. We had the January 6th craziness where people actually attacked the Capitol. Those people are going to be released here fairly soon and probably given back pay or something. Yeah, kind of crazy. Anyway, that's going to take place. But after that, Congress reconvened. They finished the election. And after that, probably around January 7th through 10th, somewhere around there of the year 2000, Congress reconvened. And Mitch McConnell stood up. And he flat out said that President Trump should have not done what he did, that he was absolutely responsible for all of it. It was an attack on Congress, plain and simple. And he pointed the finger right at Trump and declared exactly what was going on. Not only that, Mark Meadows, who was the Speaker of the House at the time, stood up and said the same thing. Literally, boom, boom, boom. This was his fault. He could have called it off. He could have done this. There was no reason for this. He told people he was going to be there, and then he wasn't there. All the things that took place. One of the heroes at this time was actually the vice president, who did not allow himself to be captured, because that was the plan. With this, things took place in a very fast basis. And a week later, Mark Meadows was down at Trump's house in Florida, shaking his hands, putting his arm around him, and having a photo op at Mar-a-Lago. And I was absolutely confused. I was thinking that they were going to call him out for what he did. He was going to have to pay for it. He was going to be held responsible. And all of a sudden, he's got his arm around him. He's making a deal. Not only that, but Mitch McConnell did the same thing. And that really confused me. Now I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe these guys are just out of integrity. And the group said, no, it's much more than that. What took place in that meeting was that Donald Trump filled them in on the fact that the next election he could not lose. And that's the one we just went through. And they were correct. And for that reason, every Republican lined up behind him, even though most of them disagreed with him. Most of them thought he was lying about, of course, it was a lie about the election being stolen, but everyone lined up behind him. Now, whether they knew what was going to take place, whether they knew what Mark Meadows and Mitch McConnell knew, I don't know. But I can tell you, every single one of them, with the exception of two, lined up completely behind him. Those two are not in office right now. So, anyway, this is kind of what took place, and I'm scratching my head. I've been a Republican all my life. I actually believe in some of the Republican principles, but it's not my party anymore. I don't know what happened. Now, so I'm confused with all these things, trying to just kind of watch and not get overly involved. And what took place? Well, this time the polls showed that, we were going to have a female president, which is something the group said we were heading toward. Well, now things have changed. And I will tell you, the group or anybody else can't accurately predict the future. We have a gentleman who's been predicting all the elections for many, many, many years, I think 19 elections. He's got all but one of them correct. Well, guess what? He was on the wrong side this time because they were using technology that people didn't know. Where some of the numbers changed, some of the numbers were blocked. We actually had 16 million less votes than we did in the year 2000. That doesn't make sense. Not with what Taylor Swift did and some of the other people did. It just doesn't make sense. So some of the information was tainted. I will tell you that. The group said we will find that out, but it's probably going to be 7 to 10 years down the road before we actually uncover all of this. Will it be another who shot President Kennedy? It might. It might very well be. The government is really good at hiding things and keeping secrets and so forth. So there's a lot of things that we can do with all this. And I really hesitate to get into conspiracy theories, but I can't hold this back anymore. I need to tell people what the group has been showing me, especially lately. With all these things taking place, we're going to see some massive changes on the planet. What is going to happen? Can't tell you exactly. We cannot predict the future. No one can. That's the reality. The truth is, what the group does is they'll show you the direction they're going. They gave the illustration of the double-decker bus. You're driving a bus. You're going down this road. The group's on the upper deck, and they can see a little further down the road than you can. They can see what's at the corners that you can't. So they're telling us the direction we're heading and the real high potentials, but they can't actually predict the future. We have to do that. We are on the planet of free choice, and we have to make our choices accordingly. So this is all politics that are going on, but we wanted to describe it to people because there's a lot of people that felt the rug was pulled out from under them, that felt that they were taken, that felt that their vote didn't have any use, that felt that there was no reason to play this game anymore. Well, it's going to change now anyway. So the reality is, I do believe the Constitution will eventually be weakened. It's already weakened. We have a separation of church and state that's completely gone. One of the states last week actually incorporated saying the Lord's Prayer, and not only saying the Lord's Prayer to kids in grade school, but also teaching religious material, Christian religious material, to grade school children as part of a required curriculum. That is not separation of church and state any longer. The United States has been taken over by the religious right. That's what's happened. And these are influential people that have received technology and help from this one faction of aliens, of our parental races. We'll talk more about this. I wanted to kind of give you some of the ideas of what took place. It is very sad. It doesn't mean the United States is going down the toilet. The human heart is huge. The human heart can change everything. Now that we've said all of this, let me bring you up to what the group really says about all of it. Number one, we've been talking about the feminine rising. The feminine rising on this planet to balance the masculine. Well, guess what? When the feminine rises, the masculine grabs hold and tries to force, because that's the difference, masculine force versus feminine harmony. That's what's taking place. A reaction to the feminine rising is grabbing hold of everything and trying to control everything. And with the aid of the parental race, they want to make a spot like the Garden of Eden where you have everything, you're well taken care of, and you don't want to go outside of that so they can control you and do what they want to do. Interesting things. With all of that taking place, all of that's in the third dimension. None of that exists in the higher vibrations of the fifth dimension. And that's something we can do right away. Why? Are we running away from our problems if we jump into the fifth dimension and start anchoring more light in that area? And to be clear, the group says we've been in the fifth dimension for a number of years, but we're using third dimensional thoughts and third dimensional realities and third dimensional tools and ways of doing things inside the fifth dimension. They kind of laugh at us and they say, you're creating the third dimension inside the fifth dimension. Why are you doing that? So we start stepping into more of our spirit, which is why we're doing the Park Bench Project, why we're doing a lot of the work that we're doing in LightMaster and many of the events that we're doing here at Espavo.org, to be able to step in to anchor the fifth dimensional reality. But I also wanted to explain what happened in the third dimension because it really confused me, and I know that it confused many others. I know that many of you agree with this. I know a lot of channels talk about aliens, ETs, whatever you want to call them. And the reality is many of them, there's some fascinating things about this too, because many of them are not from well, not many, but some of them are not from the distant stars that we think of. There's a lot to that because dimensional shifting is possible. We know absolutely very little about it. There's so many things that they have given us, including free energy, including anti-gravity, including transportation. A lot of things that can happen very quickly, even faster than the speed of light that we know. Well, the speed of light, according to the group, is determined in our segment of reality. There's others right next to us. The group talked about timeline crosses, other things of that nature with other timelines that are going over here. Well, just imagine that here, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, 300,000 kilometers per second. Over here, it's a third faster. Over here, it's slower. So we have different realities that exist in the same space that we can't see because they're in a different area. Some high-level technical beings, in other words, technological evolved beings, can shift those dimensions. And that's what we see happen all the time when we see a UAP, which is the new word for UFO, the unidentified aerial phenomenon, a spaceship coming like this and just disappearing, or taking off so fast and completely disappearing. They're moving between those realities. And many times that's exactly what it is. There's a lot to this that they'll talk about as well because I'm somewhat of an amateur scientist myself, so I love to be able to hear some of these things. But I wanted to kind of explain that to you and share with you what took place. The United States has been taken over. It's that simple. They made deals with Trump when he was in presidency in 2018. Real simple. Remember he created the Space Force? Actually, it'd probably be a good idea, but was it actually to prevent the space beings from coming in and taking us over? You know what? If our parental races wanted to take us over, they would have done it a long time ago. They want to evolve us for the most part, and some of us do want it. Some of them do want something from us. They do want to take us over. They want to tweak the game a little bit. They want to play in many ways. And it's absolutely fascinating. But with that level of technology, we have nothing to fear about forcibly taking us over. They could have done that from the beginning. And they actually tried it in the beginning, which was the Garden of Eden. Interesting stories. Okay, I feel better. I feel like I've finally broken the bonds of not being able to talk about. And it was simply my imposition on myself. It wasn't the group telling me not to talk about these things. I had just this huge resistance. And furthermore, I think many humans have that same resistance. They want to see facts. They want to see the spaceships that were captured, which, well, they're here. They're being reverse engineered by different countries that they've crashed in. The United States has anti-gravity machines that they're playing with, and different things of that nature. Also, the good news about this is that we're being watched in some ways. The Earth is in trouble. We've told you that before. The pollution is massive. There are many of these parental races and factions of these parental races that are trying to work with saving the Earth. It's huge. They don't want to see this thing go the way it's going. So that's good news. And there's other factions that are trying to manipulate us and control us. With the super fast advent of the technology that's happened, we've become somewhat callous. The reality is that most light workers on this planet are hugely empathic. And yet empathy in general has gone way down amongst all of humanity, mostly because of social media. You end up wanting to say something that's going to get you lots of followers rather than actually expressing your heart or being able to do that in some way, because it doesn't travel as well. Interesting things. This too will change. And these things don't exist in the fifth dimension. So the more anchoring that we can do of the fifth dimension, the more we can bring it into our lives. Is it, like I started to say, are we running away from our problems? No. What's happening is we anchor the fifth dimension, but our families, everybody else is still using third dimensional rules, so we still have to come down and go to Thanksgiving dinner. We still have to sit down with people, and we end up influencing them. Not so much about telling them which way to vote or anything of that nature, because that definitely doesn't work. But the thing that does work is living in the higher vibrations, where these things don't matter. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could return to the days of Lemuria? Lemuria, we had these huge open heart chakras. We could feel other people. We knew what they were thinking. We knew what they were feeling. Times of no more secrets. It was incredible. Huge empathy from everyone. The leaders, they told stories about the leaders. They were responsible for very important things, like picking up the trash, like making sure that communications were there, whatever we had as far as transportation or anything of that nature. They were responsible for that. That's where they should be. Maybe we'll get there. Let's anchor the fifth dimension together, shall we? And let's do what we can. Don't fall into fear about this. Please, that's not what this is about. This is about empowerment, plain and simple. Step up, step out of it, and let's hold hands. I'm Steve Rother. I'm the channel for the group. This is the Backstory Podcast, a special edition. Espavo, everybody. Thanks for being with me.